There's a city in the US with 3 million people, the third largest in the country, only challenged in density and wealth by New York City. As a matter of fact, it's right next to New York City. Have you guessed it yet? Well, you can't, because it doesn't exist. What I'm referring to is the urban areas of New Jersey immediately west of New York City. Combined, this area is larger and denser than Chicago, but it has 150 mayors. Due to a comedy of errors, the densest state in the nation ended up without a single municipality in the 50 largest cities. This is the story of Boroughitis. Let's take a step back. Does it even matter that New Jersey doesn't have a major city? Well, let me ask it another way. Should the densest state in the US, containing entire counties with higher population densities than Philadelphia and Chicago, have 565 towns? Over the course of this series, I'm going to get you to come to the same conclusions that I have. New Jersey's municipal balkanization is bad for both governments and citizens. To get you there, we need to start from the beginning. At the end of the American Revolution, where the former province of New Jersey, a colony of Great Britain, became the third state in the Union. The legacy of colonization is where we get our first set of arbitrary lines, known as municipalities. 90 of them, formed through various royal charters or spun off from existing royal land under British common law. This was mostly driven by economic speculation. If you could produce an economically viable town, you may just be able to convince the crown to give you a charter. Some of the first acts of the state legislature were to recharter all of these existing cities, like Newark, followed by new charters for Elizabeth, Paterson, and Trenton. Charters were a bespoke set of laws defining the power of the mayor and council and allowing the town self-governance through the creation of their own laws. As these cities began to expand, the areas around them would soon be subdivided into more towns. For example, the environs around Newark and Elizabeth would soon turn into 10 individual towns. While cities were being organized, there was still the matter of townships. These rural lands existed outside of the denser metropolitan areas. The New Jersey legislature got around to reorganizing them in 1798 with the Township Act. This law officially established an elected council for every township, where all free white men over the age of 21 with adequate wealth would be able to vote for council members, hence the now out-of-vogue position name, freeholders. After all this bookkeeping was done, the focus shifted to the new growing industry, mining. The boomtowns across Morris and Sussex counties wanted to establish themselves with their own charters upon the discovery of copper and iron. Along with this resource extraction speculation, there were dozens of transportation companies looking to get in on the action. Toll roads, stagecoach companies, and the innovative Morse Canal. By 1834, 12 towns were formed from the mining mania. In the 4-decade period since the Township Act, the majority of towns formed in New Jersey were in this part of the state. The mining boomtown formation was the first indication of the flood of new towns to come. This was brought by the era of the steam ferry, interurban trolley, and the train. No longer bound by horse and sail, people started to settle across the mostly barren state. This would mean only one more thing: more requests to the state legislature to incorporate. The legislature, which at the time needed to review and approve every single town charter, quickly became bogged down with all this administrative overhead. Meeting at loggerheads in the 1870s, the legislature churned out 4 different bills which would allow the incorporation or annexation to happen by direct democracy, no longer involving explicit legislative approval. One of these specific laws allowed areas under 4 square miles and 1,000 people to secede from the townships with a boilerplate charter and become a borough. This resulted in a massive boom of new boroughs, from 17 before 1878 to 56 by 1889, eventually reaching the 121 today. The next big milestone was a law in 1894 which required each municipality to have only one school district. This was a move to consolidate school districts, of which there were over 1,000 at the time. But the result was more municipal fragmentation. Seeing the opportunity to get their own schools, many wealthy communities moved to create their own municipality, which would have their own elite exclusive schools. This was seen most in Bergen County, which was filled with bedroom communities of Paterson, Newark, and New York. The county, roughly the size of all the real parts of New York City, not Staten Island, would end the borough craze with 70 independent municipalities. Monmouth County, which started 1834 with only 7 municipalities, would end the Boroughitis craze with 53 municipalities. A weird quirk of this era is Atlantic County, which instead of making boroughs, had 13 of its 23 municipalities as cities, the smallest being Corbin City, with less than 300 inhabitants. The legislature, seeing the mess that they had created, attempted to turn off the spigot in 1896, preventing boroughs from being formed without their approval. But that didn't end the formation of new municipalities. There were 100 more that would be formed up to the present day. Various events would see communities rushing to the legislature with their new town charters. World War I saw new ship manufacturing towns. Prohibition would see the creation of towns for Gilded Age barons to imbibe. New rail lines would bring exclusive resort towns. These same rail lines would see dry towns spring up to keep the liquor-drinking heathens out. Even something as mundane as paved streets would trigger outrage enough to create a new town. The last municipality formed was Lock Arbor Village in 1957. Since then, a handful of municipalities have been reabsorbed into the larger municipality from which they were split off from, but there has been no larger trend to do so. Many failed attempts have left politicians to fear even proposing such in the event that they would lose the following election. Teterboro, Pine Valley, and Tavistock, with less than 100 residents combined, have all fought off multiple attempts to merge. The municipal designations of township, village, borough, and city used to mean something. Townships were meant to be rural governments, cities for dense governments, and villages and boroughs for everything in between. But now, some of the smallest, most dense areas in New Jersey are townships like Weehawken and Shrewsbury. There's little incentive to switch from one form to another after various acts allowed for different forms of governance without changing designation. Through laws such as the Walsh Act and Faulkner Act, by giving the borough or township the rights that are only available to cities in other states, by changing their local laws with new charters. None of the regular tools of consolidation were needed, effectively freezing towns in amber. This brings us to the modern day with 565 dysfunctional fiefdoms. The efforts to consolidate, like in New York City and Philadelphia, never materialized for numerous cities in New Jersey. Now, with the history behind us, let us continue in the next video, where we'll dive into the racist, classist, religious, and capitalistic situations which created these towns and perpetuates their continued separate existences. Thanks to listening to part 1 of the Boroughitis series. Please consider subscribing so you get the rest of the videos in the series, and also consider supporting this project on Patreon. Thanks, and I will see you next time.